Welcome to another edition of The Score with Brett Wiseman here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, tobaccoroadsportsradio.com, WWBG 1470 AM Greensboro. And yes, the one and only Steve Wiseman is on with us this Saturday morning. Steve, your world of, as you know it, as college sports has kind of been flipped on its opposite axis in the past week or so. So, first of all, is your head on straight at the moment?
It is, but the world is upside down because up is down and down is up and east is west and there is no more west. It's all east.
I was going to say, I don't think there's a west anymore.
It fell off.
There's no west anymore. You got east, Midwest, kind of west, cliff at this point.
Yeah, it's crazy. And, we went through this 10 years ago, right? When, the Big Ten expanded and the Pac-12 almost swallowed up the Big 12, and then they backed off and didn't. And then turns out maybe they should have because they'd still be alive now. That was their chance to be the big shark in the water, and now they've been picked apart and eaten alive. So yeah, it's crazy, but and nothing makes sense anymore. Teams traveling across country for games. 4 teams in the Pacific time Pacific time zone are playing in the Big Ten, and at least they have those 4 to travel together amongst themselves a little bit. That'll ease that travel. But as far as the ACC goes, which is my area of concern, they need to add somebody. They know they have to. The problem is that the options out there all come with issues, and travel issues and money issues, and all the great choices like Washington and Oregon are gone, and so they need to improve money. They're just trying to whittle out a deal, right? Trying to make it okay. Well, Stanford and Cal come in at 60% of the media revenue for the first 2 years, or 50%, and SMU says they'll come in for nothing because they just want to be in a Power 4 conference. I guess it's not Power 4. Anyway, so at some point, maybe they'll get to the point where everything lines up, but right now it just doesn't seem to. And I know as we talk here, the whole thing can be different by the time the next 5 minutes happen. So that's the way this is going on right now.
I could look out my window next, and the Cal Stanford band play could be being reenacted in my backyard because they've joined the ACC. The thing that gets me about all of this is other sports. And we'll get to the football aspect of it in a second. By the way, if I looked outside and saw that in my backyard, we're talking about basketball or, some other maybe fall or winter sports, baseball too. Like, Rutgers is going to have to go on a Wednesday night in the middle of the school year to play USC. They're going to have to go all the way across the country in the middle of the week, in the middle of the school year, to play a basketball game and then come right back. And how many people are going to tune into the Big Ten Network to watch Rutgers and USC at 10:30 on a Wednesday night? Nobody.
And you're right. Like for football, this works out fine. It's like the NFL. You only play 1 game a week, right? So you can work around that. I mean, there are
exactly.
They fly charter flights. Even going from Eugene, Oregon to Lansing, Michigan is it's a pain in the butt, but you can do it with a charter plane. They're not going to charter.
Right.
I don't know how. Volleyball, track, swimming, all those sports,
golf,
and those are people that.
Right.
Let's face it, the education part of this whole deal is more important to them than it is to football and basketball players. Right? There's no NBA. There's no big money for volleyball players, right? Like there is for football and basketball. So they've put themselves in a terrible situation to where I think where we're heading long term is football's going to separate, and they're gonna do their own thing. They're already outside the NCAA anyway, right? The NCAA doesn't control the college football playoff. At some point, those bigger schools are going to pull themselves out, and football will do its own thing. and they'll have their own conferences, and then all the other sports will do what they want to do. Now, again, that's so radical that it can't just happen in 1 week or 2 years or 5 years. It's going to happen. It has to happen gradually because it's such a dramatic shift. But I really Bleav that's the direction this has to end up in. Otherwise, none of this is going to work.
I'm with you. There's only one way this can go, and I think in the next 7 to 10 years, what you're going to see is a college football that looks akin to the NFL in terms of you basically have an AFC and an NFC in college, and you have Eastern, Western, and Midwestern divisions within those.
Right.
The winners of those two compete for a national championship. You have playoffs just like everywhere else.
That's right. Because the way we got to this is all the conferences make their own deals with TV, right? It would be like, and somebody else made this analogy, it would be like the AFC West has their own TV deal and the NFC East has their own TV deal. It's nonsensical, right? It would never work out correctly. Right. It has to be everybody all under one umbrella making the TV deal for it to work out the best.
And remember, the NFL had that to a degree at one point where CBS had a deal with the AFC and Fox had a deal with the NFC. When Fox first jumped in the mid-90s, they took CBS's NFC deal, NBC's AFC deal transferred over to CBS. Now none of that is a thing. Now everybody just gets their pick of the litter on which games to flex where and all that kind of stuff. But I think that the big domino in terms of when you look at how media and TV has driven this entire cycle, Colorado going back to the Big 12 was a shot in the armor. And then the Pac-12 not even being able to get a media rights deal with Apple TV Plus was not just a dent, it was a bullet hole.
And then there was blood in the water. And that's when the Sharks started circling and off we went. And so the ACC, back to our neck of the woods, had an opportunity to jump in there and do something. And they got outmaneuvered by the Big 12. And it's tough to say, but it's true. And I know that it's easier for the Big 12 to add the four corner schools, Arizona and Colorado and Utah. The geography works better for them. So they were in a better position to do that. So I don't want to slam Jim Phillips and ACC 100% for that, because geography did play a role in their reticence to do that, right? But the fact of the matter is the Big 12 went in there and got it done. And the ACC was talking with those schools, trying to work out something, maybe even to have Pac-12 TV games controlled on the ACC network. And that was the partner, because ACC network has better carriage agreements and coverage nationally than anything the Big 12 had. They would have had a TV network at least, not just Apple Plus. But anyway, that all blew up. That all got blown to hell by the Washington, Oregon going to the Big 10. But anyway, the chance was there. And now, that chance that's a missed opportunity. And now the ACC's left with what they're left with, which is Stanford, Cal, and maybe SMU, which, isn't very appealing, but that's what you got.
Hey, at least you get they were handed the worst penalty in NCAA history, narrative to carry along, Go see Pony Excess on ESPN Plus if you don't know what I'm talking about.
Yes, envelopes. A payroll to meet.
You talked about the geography. Yes, that. You talked about the geographical aspect of all of this. And again, other sports are going to have to play a role in this, but when you look at conferences like what's left of the American, where the Sun Belt is right now, and what's left of Conference USA after all of Conference USA went to the American to replace all the American schools that went to the Big 12. Yes, football/media drives all of this, but you don't know for how long, Steve. The 4 years I was at App State and the years since I've left, people have asked me, why doesn't App just join the ACC? They don't want to go 2-20 in basketball.
Right.
They're already in a really good baseball conference with Coastal Carolina, Southern Mississippi, Troy, just to name 3 schools. They want to compete in something. right? So
Right.
all these schools kind of have to weigh that. Western Kentucky's not going to jump up to the ACC just to go 6-6 in football and then get smoked in women's golf every year. There's pros and cons to all of this. Wake Forest is the only ACC school, I think, or the ACC is one of the only schools that has field hockey. One of the only conferences that has field hockey.
Right.
So you take that into account as well.
Yeah, I mean, the schools that you mentioned there, maybe they can hold their own in football, right? But the other sports, they would get annihilated, and that's your student athlete experience would be very poor. And how would you recruit? I mean, you get to play in the ACC, but you're going to get your brains beat in. We don't have the resources. We don't have the resources to compete with Clemson and Florida State and the teams that are spending all these millions of dollars on their athletic programs. So you'd be at a disadvantage by so much that that's not a factor that's going to happen.
I think the ACC, I think they're going to try their darndest, and they probably are currently trying their darndest to get Notre Dame to join as a full-time member. That would be a big gain and maybe would lure a Cal or a Stanford or an SMU. But at this point, if I'm the refugees of the Pac-12, which is basically, let's see, who we got left? We got 4 teams left, and then I don't even know what Bill Walton's going to do with his life because he doesn't have anything to talk about outside of the Pac-12. So he's going to have to find some kind of other hobby or interest. Well, he has one. We just can't talk about it on live radio.
It's legal in some states.
Either the keyword some. The Pac-12, I think, is going to end up merging with the Mountain West.
Right.
I think that's a legitimate possibility, is that the Mountain West just kind of swallows. Exactly.
Because.
And it makes sense. Boise State's right there. Boise State's not far. Idaho could move back up as well.
Yeah, it works out geographically. And but Cal and Stanford want nothing to do with the Mountain West because of their academics, right? And they're bigger.
Right.
They fit better with the ACC. As far as they're in the AAU, the American Association of Universities, high level academics, right? On par with Duke and Carolina and Virginia and places like that. So that's where that makes sense. And Notre Dame fits in there too. And so, again, they're still holding out that they're going to hold on to their football independence. But at some point, and you have to wonder, and we had a story about this week that Luke DeCock, our columnist, wrote about. Notre Dame's TV deal with NBC may not be as lucrative going into the future because the changes to the business model of television. And NBC may want to put Notre Dame games on Peacock to try to bump that up. That's where they can make more money. But Notre Dame may not like that. And they may not get as much money from that they're expecting. So at some point, maybe that'll come down and it'll make the ACC more attractive for Notre Dame football, which, again, would fit in better with Stanford and Cal.
5 years ago, I would have said you would have to have pried the NBC deal from Notre Dame's cold, dead hands, or just the hands of touchdown Jesus up there in South Bend. But you mentioned it. Peacock is a huge aspect of this. You look at the giant deal that NBC just signed with the Big Ten. You want to know where the first official Big Ten broadcast on NBC is? Peacock. It's West Virginia, Penn. You got me?
I got you now, yeah. Oh.
Steve, what we were saying before we kind of cut out there was Peacock's a huge aspect of this. When you look at the Big Ten's deal with NBC, the first official game of that deal is only on Peacock. It's ECU and Michigan from the Big House 3.5 hours before the big Penn State West Virginia game that night. So when Notre Dame looks at this and sees some of our games might be on Peacock, and I can almost guarantee you that at least 65% of Notre Dame's fan base is not a subscriber to Peacock. So they might be raising some eyebrows in the next round of negotiations.
Changes are happening in the business, that's for sure. And it only works for NBC, for Notre Dame, because they want to be on over-the-air NBC. And now NBC has the Big Ten. Any Big Ten game,
Exactly.
or a lot of them, are going to be ahead of Notre Dame in the pecking order. You know, anything, Ohio State, Penn State, those are as big or bigger audiences than Notre Dame. So NBC doesn't really need Notre Dame anymore to carry the water for their college football coverage. They've got the Big Ten. And so, yes, everything is changing. So what's new? The whole world's changing on us as we speak. So, you know, all the expectations of Notre Dame has been steadfastly independent. That is softening under their feet.
Yeah, you said it perfectly right there. Steve, we're going to let you go because we know you got a busy time trying to get the world back on its flat axis. But thanks so much for coming on and joining us this morning.
Glad to be with you.
Back here on The Score with Brett Wiseman on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com, WWBG 1470 AM Greensboro. We are joined once again on this lovely Saturday morning by the one and only Desmond Johnson. And before we get into his thoughts and dealings with the Carolina Panthers and their preseason opener against the New York Jets set to come tonight, Des, we just talked with Steve Wiseman last segment about the wonderful, wacky, and wild world of college sports realignment. You, I understand, have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't like it. I mean, I think it's really unfortunate what's happened, because I feel like in the end, no one's going to be happy. Like when we look back at this a decade from now, it's not going to blossom into what everyone believes, like, you know, end of the yellow brick road type thing. I think everyone's going to look back on it and go, what have we done? Because no one's thinking about the other sports. They're only thinking about football. And now it's like in the Big Ten, you're telling me Rutgers women's basketball has to travel cross country to play USC in a regular season basketball game on a Wednesday night in the middle of the school year. And we're supposed to be like, well, it doesn't really matter. That doesn't matter. As long as football is good, then we're good to go. It's like, it's going to mess the whole college experience up to me. Like, regardless of, like, I don't care what team goes to what conference or whatever, but now you've got it to the point where literally 3 conferences, well, 4 if you add the ACC's 14 teams, 4 conferences are going to have the majority of all of the Power 5 schools in them, and it's all for football. So it's like they're not looking at logistics and stuff. I'm happy, although this might be dated in a couple of days or weeks, that the ACC hasn't picked up Stanford and Cal, because it just doesn't make any sense. Like, logistically, financially, it doesn't, not just football, just all this. It just doesn't make any sense. And the ACC shouldn't be on the hook to save Cal and Stanford the way it's starting to get painted, that the ACC is their only hope or whatever. Their conference made this bed. So the only thing the ACC can do, really, that would change anything going forward, there's really only one piece left, and that's Notre Dame. Like, That's it. If they can convince Notre Dame to come in as a full-time member, then that changes the ballgame. If they can't, then I don't know what happens to the ACC after 2036, because I don't think there's going to be any money. I don't think this money that's here now that the SEC got and the Big 12 got and the Big 10 got, that money's not going to exist in a couple of years. We've already seen ESPN cut like 500 workers to save $5 billion. They have realized they overspent on college football. So
absolutely,
when I see like Florida State, like, oh, we want to leave, we want to go someplace else. Who wants you? No one said they wanted Florida State. Like, so that's the part no one's even talking about. Who wants Florida State right now? And SEC doesn't want to expand. The Big Ten's got 18 teams in it, and the Big 12 had
Big 12 I think is at 16.
Yeah, one's at 16. I think one's at 14. The SEC's at 16. ACC's at 14.
Yep,
there's no room. You're in the right spot already, Florida State. But it's neither here or there. I just wanted to start off with that because that seems to be the main topic of discussion in the sports world, and had to get that off my chest because my shows aren't back on yet.
Well, that and the fact that the Orioles decided to be a bunch of idiots and suspend their broadcaster for no particular reason. But I'll get into that in the next segment. Trust me, I've got some thoughts on that as a play-by-play savant myself. But let's get to the growling topic at hand. That would be the Carolina Panthers. Joint practices this week with the New York Jets in Spartanburg. They practiced during the daytime, so Aaron Rodgers didn't have a chance to turn the lights out. Speaking of him, first of all, for all of you going to the game, no, he's not playing.
No, he ain't playing.
Collective disappointment. I'm sorry. It's a preseason game. If he steps on a leaf the wrong way, anyways.
There's nothing to gain by throwing what was he, 38? There's nothing to gain throwing a 38-year-old Aaron Rodgers out there week 1 of the preseason versus the Panthers. Like,
no.
Yeah.
Speaking of guys you're probably not going to see, Andy Dalton. Because there's really not any point to throw him out there. You need to get Bryce Young game reps. Matt Corral needs reps. You're only going to keep 2 quarterbacks on the roster, presumably. So Matt Corral at least needs to show something of, are we going to keep him on the practice squad, or are we going to use him as trade bait? There's no reason for Andy Dalton to be out there. There's a reason for him to be on the sideline and coach the 2 of them.
I agree. I'm not sure if they're only going to go with 2 quarterbacks. I'm not sure. Matt Corral wasn't drafted by this coaching staff, so that he was already on a fine line to begin with when he started the season. He didn't really play last year, so there wasn't a lot of tape to go off of him. Former 3rd-round pick. I could see the Panthers maybe flipping him for something. I don't know what. If it's a draft pick, then he was drafted in the 3rd round. He's a year older. He's had a major injury, so you're probably looking at maybe a 5th, maybe a 6th-round pick for him. And if that's the case, I don't know if Carolina decides to trade him, because eventually you're going to have to replace Dalton. So I could see him holding on to him throughout the season and kind of grooming him to be the backup to Bryce, but that might not be Matt Corral's plan, so we'll kind of keep an eye on that and see what happens. But as it stands right now, Matt Corral should get the majority of the snaps in the preseason. I'm pretty sure I'd heard Bryce is going to start, but I would be surprised if you see Bryce more in a couple of series, if not the first quarter.
Yeah, a couple people had made the mention that he was going to play pretty much the most of the first half, if not the entire first half. I think if he comes out for the start of the second quarter, the first series of the second quarter, I'm going to be shocked. I think Matt Corral is going to play at least 3 quarters of football.
Yeah, probably depends on what the offensive line's looking like and whatever they have drawn up, because they're not going to run. They're going to be still running pretty vanilla stuff week 1 preseason, and honestly, from my understanding, they haven't really ran enough stuff that the fans can tape or whatever when they're out there during practice. So people still don't know exactly what the offense is, but if you go off of Frank Wright's history and Thomas Brown's history comes from the Sean McVay tree, it's kind of a hybrid of a really strong focus on the run game. Reich uses a lot of 2 tight end sets in the pass game. And it's got elements of the West Coast offense in it, which fits Bryce Young to a T. Being precision, on point, 5-yard, 10-yard, 15-yard out, that kind of thing, but still be able to get it over top of the defense. They're going to have a mix of things. It's not going to just be one dude they depend on. So this offense is going to be fun to watch, actually, which is crazy to say for Panther fans over the past 4 years, where the offense was anything but fun to watch. I think this is going to be a really fun year for Panther fans.
The West Coast offense, inherently, you have to make throws on the move. You have to be mobile. Your quarterback doesn't necessarily have to be a running quarterback, but in this case, Frank Reich's run background, he can use Bryce Young a lot more than a runner than I think any quarterback really Frank Reich has had in past years. I mean, who's he had in past years? Carson Wentz, Phillip Rivers. Nick Foles, like
Andrew
this
Luck
is
for like the last year or two of his career. Yeah. So, I mean, and Luck.
right. This is the most athletic quarterback that Frank Reich has had, right?
In terms of mobility, yeah, for sure. Now, arm wise, I'd probably still give it to Andrew Luck, but
no doubt about it.
But yeah, mobility, and Bryce isn't exactly a running quarterback, although you might see some RPO elements in this offense because he did run that at Alabama. They're not worried about running him because of his size, and he knows how to get down. I think it's more, Bryce is more mobile in the sense of like a Steve Young was, in terms of you didn't run plays for Steve necessarily, but if Steve got flushed out of the pocket, he could make a 20-yard gain or whatever on you and pick up the first down. Kind of like a Russell Wilson, like younger Russell Wilson. If it's 3rd and 15, he's going to scramble around and drive you nuts, and receivers are going to break off the routes, and then he's either going to run for 16 yards or he's going to hit somebody for 16 yards and get the first down and move the chains. That's the kind of movement I would see from Bryce, but it's not going to be like Cam Newton where he's getting 10, 12 designated calls to run the ball up the gut like every game. That's not what they're going to do with Bryce.
Yeah, if any of you had the assumption that this is going to be like a Lamar Jackson situation and Bryce Young to get a direct snap and just run like quarterback ISO straight up the middle, not happening. This is going to be a lot like what I saw Aaron Rodgers do back in the day, which was get out of the pocket and then juke a defender out of his shoes and then get out of bounds.
Yeah,
or
so
get into the end zone.
Right sideline, just to buy some time for his guys.
Yep.
Bryce is the type of quarterback that, and I've compared him to Steph Curry for going on half a year now, where he's going to get his guys involved, and some dudes are starting to pop up in the training camp's over now, but dudes are starting to pop up in preseason for the Panthers offense that he seems to be building bonds with, and I'm curious to see how that carries over when live bullets start flying around when the season begins.
It is going to be interesting, and you talked about fans not really being able to tape a whole lot in practice. Who knows? There could be some plays that Frank Reich pulls out, especially with what we talked about last week, which was Bryce Young's advanced knowledge of this playbook. There should be some kinks or some wrinkles that while he's in there, Frank Reich might not hesitate to pull the trigger on trying.
Something I thought about this, and maybe I might bring this up on one of these debate shows that I host, but Bryce Young might very well be the smartest quarterback the Panthers have ever had. And by that, I mean his ability to process quickly, to remember things. He was helping install protection schemes like earlier this week. Like veteran quarterbacks don't even do that with the coaching staff. And he was in there kind of leading the meeting. Like he knows this offense. He's only been in it he's had the book now since he got drafted, but he's only been able to work with it and do that kind of stuff with the rest of the team for 2 weeks. So it's like I hate it when people tell me not to be excited about the Panthers, because when I'm seeing what they're doing, and then you get to see actual film of them on the field doing stuff, catching stuff, implementing what they are, it's hard not to be excited for them. Like, it's really hard. It's really hard not to be excited if you're a Panther fan right now after the past 4 years we just went through.
It's hard not to be excited about the offensive side of the ball. You knew coming into this you were going to be excited about the defensive side of the ball, but I don't think a whole lot of people are really, like you said, that are used to being excited about coming into a season with an opportunity to score 24, 28, 30 points a game.
Yeah, and even last year, once Steve Wilkes took over as the interim head coach and we kind of developed more of a run-first philosophy, they were scoring decent amounts, but not enough to really feel like, this game is taken care of. They all the games were competitive. But this offense has an opportunity to be really good. Like, if everything falls into place the way it has so far, I would not be surprised to see the Panthers in the top half of offensive ratings this year. Overall yardage, run game. Now, Bryce, I don't know exactly how much they're going to have him throwing the ball, because I do think they're going to be a run-first team. With Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard, and Raheem Blackshear, which is a name that a lot of Panther fans need to remember in the back of their head as a guy that he came on strong late last year. And my Sports Illustrated comrade, Skylar Callahan, who's been at training camp every day, basically kind of gave a nod of approval for what he's been seeing from him. He didn't go into details. He said he didn't want to jinx it, but he was like, he's the home run hitter. Like, keep your eye on him. Remember his name, Raheem Blackshear. In the running back field for Carolina.
who knows? They could end up using a guy like that in kind of a punt return or kick return, home run hitter kind of scenario.
Yeah.
Give me 3 things that you're watching for tonight in this preseason opener.
Well, depending on who plays, because I would imagine guys like Justin Houston, who they just signed, will not suit up for that game. He's 34. They just brought him in this week. I don't think they'll have him in there. I'm curious to see the depth in the secondary, because I'm imagining those guys are going to get some run. Guys like Keith Taylor, Von Bell, who they brought over free agency. I'm curious as to where Jeremy Chin is going to be. We were talking about this on Bleav in Panthers earlier in the week, where Jay Stu was basically saying Chin's going to kind of play a rover type role, similar to like Troy Polamalu with the Steelers back in the day, where he might line up, with the linebackers in that group and threaten the blitz and pull out. He might line up in the secondary and nickel. Like you won't know where he is, like a lot of times. So you won't know he's defending. And that's what made Troy so dangerous, where he's just, I just have the image in my head of him just kind of swooping in from the middle of the field to get an interception from somebody on the sideline because the quarterback wasn't paying attention to him because he was way over there thinking he was doing something else. That's going to be Jeremy Chin. So I'm curious about that. And then third, I want to know who the other running backs are going to be on this team. There's a running back. I've had a couple of friends that are and App State grads that have asked about Cameron Peoples. Did I get the name right? Cameron Peoples?
Yep, Cameron Peoples. That's him. That's my
he's
guy.
He's I thought he was dinged up, so I'm not sure if he'll be available tonight. But if he is, then this is the type of game where you can kind of Victor Cruz them and get your name out there, because that's how Victor Cruz got put on, was in preseason, just doing stuff. Nobody knew who he was before preseason, and this is an opportunity for somebody like Cameron Peoples, same type of path, undrafted free agent, latch on with a team, get in the preseason. And now with one less game, you only got 3 games to really show what you can do. And they're only going to keep X amount of running backs. So, I mean, you've got the 3 I already mentioned. I could see them maybe holding on to a 4th one, because Laviska Shenault can kind of play flanker and play running back too a little. So there's like 3 or 4 running backs competing for that one spot, because I'm pretty sure Blackshear's going to be on. So can Peoples be the one that does it? I do remember him from college being really, really good at App. So those are probably the 3 things I'll be looking for week 1. I don't know how much you'll really be able to gather. Preseason week 1 is kind of sloppy. It's kind of a sloppy ordeal.
Yeah, I was going to use the term feeling out process, but sloppy would be more accurate. Sloppy would be a lot more accurate, especially with the one last preseason game, though. There's a lot of guys that are going to be fighting for jobs that maybe they could have gotten to week 2 of the preseason a couple of years ago with where they are on the 90-man training camp roster. But remember, we're getting cut by 25 every week here, so thereabouts. So there's some guys that are going to be going home after this weekend, and there's going to be some guys that are wearing a Panther uniform tonight that are going to be playing for their lives, and that's always a fun thing to watch.
Yeah, so I think Monday or Tuesday you'll get cuts from off of this. So we're at that part of the season. They're trying to get it down to 53. Man, we're only 28 days, 29 days away from actual real football, like real NFL football, and we'll have it till February. So this is the opportunity for some of these guys to chase their dream. So I do love this time of the year, from high school up to the pros. Like August just kind of feels like that part of the year where it's like, it feels like the start of the year, the start of the sports year, kind of, to me anyway. So instead of it being January to December, it feels like it's August to July in sports world. So I'm excited. I'm ready for everything to kind of get rocking and rolling.
There we go. I believe we're back online now. But, Des, as we said, guys could have made their way to a second of a preseason maybe. But with it being shortened, there's going to be guys that are playing for their uniforms.
Yeah, no game 4, which, to be honest, was a throwaway game anyway. Usually a lot of times
exactly
the guys that played in game 4 weren't going to make the team. So they're just out there kind of auditioning for other teams. So you just kind of took that game away, which is why I understand Frank Wright saying that Bryce Young's going to play probably more minutes you would have expected him to preseason game 1, because you kind of need to get out there and get the kinks out, because their first 2 games are division games, week 1 and week 2. So you don't want to, and a lot of teams start off slow. Like, remember, the Patriots seem like they always start out slow the first 4 weeks of the season because of the way they handle preseason. They almost treat September, well, when they had Brady, they almost treat September as their preseason, and they kind of, you know, as long as they're 2-2 or whatever, when they get out of it, they're good to go. We can't afford to do that as Panthers. We need to get out early, because these are division games right at the very, very beginning. They can set a standard like right at the jump against Atlanta and against the Saints. The Saints aren't going to have Kamara week 2. Atlanta, I'm still not sure what's going on with their quarterback situation. They're still a couple drafts away. So these are statement games the Panthers can do early to set the tone in the NFC South, because I do think it's going to be a race.
I have to ask you before we let you go, because I'm a Packers fan, so I have to at least bring him up because I can't escape it. Should everyone be freaking out or reacting the way that they are to what Aaron Rodgers said about Bryce Young?
Said about who?
Bryce Young.
You cut him. Bryce Young. Freaking out about it? Well, what part? The part that the Carolina's in good hands, or what specifically?
Everybody seems to think, a lot of people that I've talked to seem to think that because Aaron Rodgers said that Carolina was in good hands with Bryce Young, and because Aaron Rodgers and Bryce Young both have the same agent, that automatically makes Bryce Young like some kind of god quarterback now. No one ever said he was bad, but he's, you know, we can't go jumping to conclusions because of that, right?
Yeah, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is like the authority on like overall quarterback play above everyone else. Like, I mean, he had an opinion. He saw him up close. He has gotten a chance to get to know him because they do have the same agent, so he knows what he's like off the field. So I thought that was valuable information, actually. And the fact that Rodgers is, you know, giving up this information really without a lot of prodding, he was eager to say, you know, Bryce Young's a good kid, Carolina's in good hands, yada, yada, yada. That's something you have to earn. Like, you don't just get that from like all-time greats. If all-time greats going out their way to say, hey, that kid is different, then he's different. He's a different dude. If they're noticing it and everybody else is noticing it, the press is noticing it, the media out there is noticing it, the fans are noticing it, eventually I get to a point where you're like, you know what? Bryce Young might be different. He might just be different. You know, he might be different. And I think he is. So we're in for a ride. I think the Panther fan base is in for a ride this year. And we aren't used to it. And I'm going to sit back and enjoy it every game, every week. Just sit back and have fun with this, because they've really made an effort to make this right for Panther fans. And I think people are going to really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think tempering the expectations is a good thing. But I think all of us, whether we're Panther fans or not, that here and in the area want to see the Panthers be successful. But we also, I think, in a way, want to be surprised at how successful they can be. The potential is there, but we also don't want to assume anything. So, Des, that's a great way to put it. Thanks so much for hopping on the program. We appreciate it, and enjoy the game tonight.
All right, bro. Appreciate you.
Welcome back here one final time to The Score with Brett Wiseman here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com, WWBG 1470 AM Greensboro. We're here every single Saturday morning, and it's been a really special one thus far. We had Desmond Johnson on just moments ago to talk Carolina Panthers, New York Jets preseason opener for the Panthers tonight against the New York Jets. And no, again, we would like to remind you, Aaron Rodgers is not playing. So get that into your heads, everybody. Sorry. Steve Wiseman was on at the beginning of the program to talk the wild, wacky weirdness that is conference realignment in college sports right now. But the biggest topic, at least for me, since I have a play-by-play background this week on the docket as far as sports is concerned, and as big of a baseball fan as I am, this Kevin Brown Orioles situation, let's just say it perturbed me to no end. And I'm not really an Orioles fan. I don't have anything against the Orioles. I don't have anything against Kevin Brown. I don't have anything against anyone on their team. And I didn't have a grievance against anyone in their front office until this past week. In case you missed it, Kevin Brown was noticeably, at least to Orioles fans, absent from their booth on Masson. That's the Mid-Atlantic sports network that the Orioles partially own with the Nationals. Kevin Brown was partially absent from their booth. And let me preface this by saying Kevin is one of the top 5, if not the best right now, regional broadcaster in Major League Baseball. Kevin is insanely well prepared, incredibly insightful, does everything the right way, the professional way, and on top of everything he does well before the game and after the game, calls an exceptional baseball game. If you have not heard Kevin Brown call a baseball game, you're missing out. When he returns to the booth this weekend, you're going to need to see it. That being said, Kevin made some comments that, for whatever reason, Orioles ownership was not too pleased with. Last week, really more about like 10 days ago now, the Orioles were playing in Tampa Bay against the Rays. It had been a house of horrors the past few years for the Orioles. Then again, the past few years for the Orioles, everywhere they've gone, including their own ballpark, has been a house of horrors. But now this year, they're sitting in first place in the AL East, a gauntlet of a division where no team is under 500. The team in last place is the Yankees, and they're 5-6 games over 500. It's not like they're playing a cupcake division, looking at you, American League Central. The Rays started the season, like 16-0? Yeah, they hit a snag recently, but the Rays had not won a series at Tropicana Field in Tampa. Kevin Brown simply pointed that out, but spun it by saying and hitting on how well the Orioles have done this year. Not just how much better they've done compared to past years. This is their best season since like 2016 at this point. But he also pointed out how much better they've done against the Tampa Bay Rays. No part of Kevin Brown's pregame monologue, which, by the way, was accompanied by a pre-typed, pre-designed graphic, nothing Kevin Brown said was derogatory, critical. There were no put-downs in his pregame open. But yet, Orioles ownership, who I think about 30 years ago now made it an absolute mockery of themselves by firing the eventual 28-plus year voice of Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN, plus the voice of the Giants for about that long. They fired John Miller at the turn of the 90s when they were about to move into Camden Yards. And then you look at what John Miller went on to do. Kevin Brown was indefinitely suspended by Orioles ownership after those comments. Makes 0 sense. None whatsoever. I've worked for folks who can be critical of some things you say or not say when I've worked for a team in the past. But at no point, to me, a true homer broadcaster is someone who is not afraid to be critical of the team when he has to be, because his responsibility, in a way, is to represent the mindset and the feelings of a fan base. He's the voice of to those fans and of those fans. Nothing Kevin Brown did in that monologue was even close to critical. It was nothing but complimentary about where the Orioles stood. Hey, this is a place we haven't played well in the past. We're playing really good baseball now, the best baseball we've played in years. The point of the segment was, hey, we may be able to win a series in this building, which was a concept unthought of before now. What convoluted, conceited, absolutely, I'm running out of words to figure out what kind of state of mind as an owner you could be in. That's to think, he thinks we suck. No. And now I've heard things about this said Orioles owner. And now the decision he made makes a lot of sense. Basically, he's just a guy who had a lot of money, decided to put it into something he was passionate about, but he knows nothing about dealing with people. He knows nothing about dealing with media. He knows nothing about dealing with a fan base. Similar to someone I may have worked for in the past, or that you may have worked for in the past. We've all had terrible bosses. Cake is taken by the guy in the top seat of the Baltimore Orioles. It was proven this week that public shaming and bullying work, because 29 other MLB broadcasters on the air at some point or another, if you watched a Major League Baseball game this week, you heard it mentioned. Whether it was in a mocking tone, whether it was support for Kevin Brown, and then some mocking, every single Major League Baseball broadcast this week, regionally or nationally, mentioned it and supported Kevin Brown. Let me really center it around this. No broadcaster should be silenced for presenting facts. And I sincerely hope that the Orioles front office uses whatever healthcare provider that they're sponsored with, visits their dermatology department soon about thin skin syndrome. Because you have to have some paper thin skin or just be really an absolute idiot to think that anything Kevin Brown said was critical. You also have to be an absolute idiot to bring this negative publicity on yourself when you're having the best season you've had in nearly a decade. It's almost like you were looking for something for the public to look at that was bad, that was negative, because that's all you're used to running, right? You're used to running a clown show. Now your team is good and you pull this? Why? There's no explanation that he could give for suspending Kevin Brown that would make sense. Kevin Brown presented facts with statistics backed up by a graphic. Nobody in the production truck for Masson was suspended. Anybody got any idea why? I'll repeat what Gary Cohen said as we close this out. Gary Cohen of the New York Mets, who's, by the way, he's in the top 5 of regional broadcasters as well on SNY. Gary Cohen, in his comments directly to Orioles ownership, said that they made a mockery of themselves when they fired John Miller. Factual. And if they don't want Kevin Brown, there's 29 other teams that do. And I can guarantee you that. There's a reason my Twitter profile picture right now is free Kevin Brown. He's coming back to the booth this weekend, but not after loads upon loads of public shaming and humiliation on the Baltimore Orioles. Who, by the way, now have the 5th longest streak in Major League Baseball of series played without being swept. They beat the Astros on Wednesday afternoon, or Thursday afternoon, I should say, to ward off a sweep for the 76th series in a row. They haven't been swept since May of 2022. So many good things are happening with this team that you have to go into whatever nether region and pull out some fake narrative for a suspension of your beloved broadcaster. Idiots. Idiots in Baltimore. There are no other words other than complete and utter stupidity behind that decision. Nothing more, nothing less. There are idiots in charge. They have a really good team, but they're drawing attention away from their really good baseball team because they're really not good people and they're not good at what they do. That'll do it for us. We'll see you next week.